Value capture at layer 1 and layer 2, the competition and trade-offs. With all eyes on scaling Ethereum 2.0, value capture at layer 1 and layer 2 is driving development in blockchain. Please welcome Tushar Jain of Multicoin Capital, Jinglan Wang of Plasma Group, who is running late and may join midway through, Jack O'Halloran of Scale Labs, Ameen Soleimani of SpankChain, and your moderator, from crypto Craze on Cheddar, Tanaya Macheel.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thanks to my panel in advance. My name's Tanaya Macheel. I'm the host of the Crypto Craze on Cheddar, and I would love to turn it over to you guys to give brief introductions of yourselves.
Hi, I'm Jack O'Halloran, CEO of Scale Labs. We are a layer 2 scalability network of elastic sidechains.
Hi everyone, my name is Tushar Jain. I'm co-founder and managing partner at Multicoin Capital. We're an active investor in this space.
Hi, my name is Ameen Soleimani. I'm the CEO of SpankChain, the summoner of the Moloch DAO. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so of course, as we all know, we're here to discuss what is top of mind for you guys as we transition to Ethereum 2.0. Looking at layer 1, layer 2, there are some setbacks. With layer 2, difficult developer experience, less security. What is top of mind for you? And I think Tushar, let's start with you.
So I think the debate between layer 1 and layer 2 is really interesting because there is no free lunch here on the technology. There's a lot of trade-offs, right? And I think as developers in this space are building products, they need to decide which trade-offs they want to choose, or which trade-offs they want the platform that they are building on top of to have chosen, right? So layer 2 will be faster. Layer 2 will have faster finality and have much better throughput. But layer 2 will likely trade off security assumptions with layer 1 in order to accomplish that. And so there's certain types of applications that belong in layer 1, certain types that belong in layer 2. And I think that's the really interesting discussion to be had is how do you differentiate? And how do you differentiate actually even within a single application which transactions should go down and settle at layer 1 versus which ones are okay to do at layer 2?
Do either of you disagree with that? Because if not, I would love to dive deeper into which applications are best for each layer.
It's hard to disagree with somebody saying there are trade-offs. There are definitely trade-offs, I would agree. There are trade-offs. He got them right in the sense that it's security. If you're on layer 1, it's more secure. If you're on layer 2, you have to make sure that you're watching the layer 1 to make sure that a transaction that you had didn't get committed to layer 1 without you knowing, and that would make you lose all your money. For things that are super high value, like individual transactions that are super high value, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put them on layer 2 because you don't necessarily need it to be fast, you just need it to be maximally secure. But if you have a lot of small transactions, then it makes a lot of sense. So in SpankChain, we've had one of the first micropayment system on Ethereum. We shipped it April of last year, and it's been in production since then. So all of our tips, which range from anywhere from $1 to $50 at a time on our site, are all on layer 2, and then get settled up in aggregate to layer 1.
So I definitely agree with both these guys. I'd add to that to say, I think as layer 2 evolves, we're seeing that it's definitely not this binary thing of this goes to layer 1, this goes to layer 2. I actually think we're going to stop calling these layer 1 and layer 2 at some point. I think we're going to have a place where action happens, where execution happens, effectively where transactions and smart contracts occur. And then we have a place that's secure and stable and a lot more expensive And not that the other execution layer is not stable and secure, but the trade-offs that you get in terms of having, sub-second block times and massive throughput and extremely low cost, obviously you have to pay for it somewhere. So then that's security. So I'm seeing this evolution, and I'm also seeing that it's not that this goes in layer 2 or this goes in layer 1 or the execution layer and the security layer. It's also when. So things can originate even on the second layer, and as they accrue in value, be moved over. So what we really have are a network of blockchains and many networks, and developers have to figure out for what they're building, what's the right interplay between performance, cost, and security.
So at what point do we start to see these distinct lines fade away, and what is the most tangible first few steps toward that?
So in the last month, I've talked to multiple projects that want to originate and mint their tokens on layer 2. So that to me is like very different than a year ago where you showed up, you built something on Ethereum, and you thought, okay, what am I going to append to this so that it's faster and it just costs less? And mainly so it costs less because it's really, really expensive. Now people are actually coming and they're looking at minting and growing assets in layer 2 and then thinking about when and how they move them over. So I think it's already happening. And again, we're building and supporting and investing in these things, but our effective customers or partners will drive that evolution. I think it's already started.
One of the most challenging things about minting tokens on layer 2, or just having assets on layer 2 in general, is the trade-off is interoperability, right? Like if I have a smart contract on the Ethereum mainnet, and now I have tokens on layer 2, I have to move those tokens back onto the Ethereum mainnet. Let's say Uniswap. You want to trade these tokens, right? So now I have to move them back and then do the transaction on the smart contract. And then if I want to bring those assets back to the layer 2, I have to then move them back, right? So long as the realm of things that you want to interact with is nearby, then you're fine, right? If you're minting a token and it's meant to mostly be transacted within that layer 2, that small. I almost kind of want to call these things shards now. It's like you have the Ethereum shards and you have the other things, and it's all blockchains, all the way down. So, but that's what you're thinking about as a developer, as a user.
Well, I also think that you can address that potentially by having your contract live on multiple layer 2 chains, right? There's no reason that the Uniswap contract, to use your example, needs to only live on the Ethereum mainnet. You can go deploy that on a Scale chain, for example, and have that live on the same Scale chain that you can have you can have DAI that's been moved onto that chain, and you can have maybe some shares of Augur markets that are trading on that chain. So I agree that it does present a challenge for layer 2, but I think that because of the huge scalability advantages that layer 2 has, you can go recreate the entire Ethereum state machine in there in every layer 2 shard if you want to and solve this problem.
It wouldn't solve it exactly though, and because you can copy state, but you can't copy liquidity, right? So the reason that somebody might want to use Uniswap is because it has all the money in there, it has the largest liquidity pool, it offers the best trading price. If I want to place a larger order, I'm going to get the least slippage when I use Uniswap on mainnet, assuming that has the best liquidity henceforth. If I have a copy of the Uniswap on some layer 2 chain, it's going to have less liquidity. If I want to place a trade, I'm going to get a potentially worse price. So I'm going to sort of think about this trade-off when I'm like, do I want this to be done right now, or do I want to get the best price? When I decide how I want to execute this transaction. And as a dApp developer, I sort of will either make this decision for my users or will present them the option of doing the slow, but less expensive if it's a large trade, or the fast, but less expensive in terms of slippage because of liquidity. So.
Because of these various trade-offs, are there standards that we should be creating or that you would like to see be created, or certain standard-setting bodies around the development of layer 2?
That's a really interesting question because I think that's another one of the challenges with building on layer 2 is that the end wallets or the browsers that the users are using need to know where to point, right? Like right now, if you're using MetaMask, MetaMask is pointing to the Ethereum mainnet. That's really easy. You don't need any configuration on the user side to say, well, which network should I point to? But one of the challenges that developers will have building on layer 2 will be, well, how do I say where this chain lives and then make sure to communicate that to the user so that the user is interacting with the right layer 2 chain? So I think some standards around communicating that will be essential to building that successfully. Though that sounds like a very achievable goal.
Yeah, and I think progress is being made there already. So, we need a Web3 connect on layer 2. If you have to wait for it to come from the mainnet, then you don't get any speed or cost savings. I'm seeing some really phenomenal development with getting those Web3 data points, and just, users shouldn't have to deal with all this complexity. They need to just show up, use an application, leverage money, and not necessarily need to manage an entirely different workflow, manage where their IP address is pointing, and they just should use apps. And I'm seeing some really cool things happening on the wallet side and people building Web3 connectors. So.
Is the success of Ethereum riding on the success of layer 2?
Absolutely. I think that if layer 2 does not work, Ethereum will not work. And I believe that with pretty high conviction, just because Ethereum is pretty far behind on layer 1 development. I mean, let's face facts. There are other layer 1 chains out there that outperform Ethereum in all the dimensions. And so I think if we expect Ethereum to win the smart contract platform wars, then I think we need layer 2 to succeed. Otherwise, Ethereum won't win, and one of the other layer 1 chains will.
Yeah, and I'll maybe add a different perspective there. That I think Ethereum's already in a really amazing place. A stable proof of work chain that is, in the state it's in today is amazing. And I think all the development, you look at what's happening with state channels and Plasma and side chains and elastic side chains, there's so much happening that today developers can plug in and build an amazing experience with proven security. And so I think all of these other networks that are launching haven't had their hack yet. And if you're a developer, you have to say, okay, should I go with Ethereum? I know there's some speed trade-offs and some costs issues, but there's a plethora of layer 2 options. And so I already think we're in a really phenomenal place, and in the next 6 months, you're going to see the results. There's 10 amazing projects already building on Scale. I know the other platforms have some really, really great traction. So I think we're already where we need to be in a lot of ways with Ethereum.
To address Tushar's point about Ethereum needing layer 2 to win, I think there's a little bit of nuance there, and the nuance is if Ethereum doesn't get layer 2 and everyone else does, that would be really bad. If it's just all the layer 1s against each other, that's less bad, because Ethereum is in a really great spot in terms of making the right trade-offs that maybe I prefer as a developer. Like EOS might be faster, but easier to revert transactions, more centralized, whereas Ethereum is more decentralized. Maybe it's a little bit slower. I can sort of live with that. And there's also a specific category of applications that doesn't really care about throughput, right? Like Uniswap, you pool liquidity, anybody can trade against it. You're trading against an automated market maker that does the math, and you can trade any amount of money in a single transaction. Throughput is sort of irrelevant. Same with a lot of DAO infrastructure. Like we just launched the Moloch DAO a couple months ago. It will have $1 million in it soon. Vitalik and Joe just joined. If the votes completed in 1 or 2 seconds or something, that would be really cool. But it's also really important to everybody that's pooled money in this thing that one, it can't be stopped, And two, if anybody like tried to remove it from the chain, they would literally have to hard fork, and every single person running the node would have to hard fork and move. So being ungovernable is also, I would consider, an advantage. Yeah, and then there's the other part, which is that like a lot of the interoperability platforms that are posing as layer 1s are actually layer 2s, because what does it mean to be an interoperability platform if you're not connecting things? So yeah, I mean, I guess my assumption of like what's about to happen is just that Ethereum's going to eat everything, and like all of the great layer 2 tech will be implemented in some form or another for Ethereum. So it'll sort of wash away any other advantages that other layer 2s might give to, or have, and then they'll just, you'll get the benefits of having the best layer 1 on Ethereum as well as all of the best layer 2 tools.
So I disagree with you on this. And what I disagree with is that Ethereum has the best layer 1. I think that Ethereum...
Who does?
Huh?
Who does?
I think that there's a lot of candidates out there.
Who's your favorite?
My favorite is one called Solana.
Does it have users?
No, it's testnet right now.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
How big are your Solano bags?
Game's not over yet. But hear me out, right? I think that Ethereum doesn't necessarily have the best layer 1, but it has the best layer 2 community. And the reason is that transitioning over to Ethereum 2.0 is going to be very complex. It's going to take a long time. And I think that Ethereum needs layer 2 to succeed as a stopgap. Because you're right, everyone's building on Ethereum today. But the current developers that are building on blockchains in general, it's a very small amount. So yes, the market share today is very dominated by Ethereum. But unless the Ethereum ecosystem is able to provide the solutions that the new developers coming into the industry want, then I think it will have a lot of difficulty succeeding. And in order to do that, I think it really needs layer 2. Because the layer 1 development is just so slow and has all of the backwards compatibility to maintain.
Jing, do you want to introduce yourself and give your layer 2 thesis, I guess?
Hello. I'm Jing. I work at Plasma Group, which is a layer 2 scaling solution for Ethereum. Well, Plasma is. And to Tushar's point, Ethereum does need layer 2, but ETH 2.0 and Plasma are not really the same thing. ETH 2.0 is trying to scale layer 1, the core protocol, aka scale the amount of trusted computation possible. But layer 2 is scaling the efficient usage of that computation. And we don't really have, we haven't achieved critical mass of users. So do we have layer 2 already, it works, it's in production. Do we really need ETH 2.0 to exist right now? I think it's fine for people to be working on it. It's fine for it to take a long time. It's a large spec, you should implement it well. But layer 2 does exist for Ethereum. And speaking to your point about these other competing blockchains, part of what makes a blockchain a leading blockchain is the network effects that it amasses. And that's, I think that Bitcoin will be a king forever, and I think that Ethereum will be too, because there's just this huge time advantage of massive communities who are dedicated to improving these chains.
We're talking a lot about layer 2. Has the value of layer 1 necessarily been fully captured or appreciated?
I guess to my point earlier, I think we're going to start thinking of layer 1 as more of a security layer and a place to store valuable assets and still do computation and a place to settle. And I think layer 2 is just going to evolve and be numerous layers, and maybe we won't even think of them as layers. It's really, people need to build things, and some people have 10, 20, 30 smart contracts that they need to figure out how they allocate across these different chains. So I think layer 1 has accrued value and captured value in the sense that it is proven to be incredibly secure, and we can do computation, and it's great, interoperability is easy. That's the beautiful thing here is you can build for Ethereum, and guess what? Immediately you have access to the entire Web3 stack. So yeah, I think a lot of the value has been captured, but I think it's going to grow, and we're going to start thinking about these things differently over the next 2 years.
Whenever we're talking about anything in crypto land or in blockchain, I like to substitute the word value with security. And the reason for that is blockchains are only as secure as they are valuable. That's literally how the whole system works. That was Satoshi's big innovation, was the game theoretic incentives that hold the whole system together. And so, whether you're talking about a proof of work system or a proof of stake system, blockchains are only as valuable or as secure as they are valuable. And so I think this question of value capture at layer 1 versus layer 2 is really interesting because it really highlights that trade-off that exists between those two, right? I think it intuitively makes sense that layer 1 should be more secure and more valuable than any given layer 2 chain, just because layer 1 is pooling the security budget of everything that lives on layer 1, including the native contracts that are on layer 1, as well as all of the layer 2 chains all pool their security down to layer 1. And so I think layer 1 should capture most of that value. However, while each layer 2 chain might have less security, it's possible that if you can pool security across various layer 2 chains, that the layer 2 chains can also provide adequate security guarantees that maybe you never even need to touch layer 1, right? And something that we're going to be keeping a very close eye on as layer 2 platforms launch and gain a lot of adoption, which we think that they almost certainly will, is that trade-off between value capture at layer 1 versus layer 2, because if you see too much activity happening at layer 2 as compared to layer 1, well then what happens when there's a reorg at the base layer, and how does that affect layer 2? Like we have theories, but we don't know yet. And so I think this is going to be one of the most interesting topics to watch in the Ethereum ecosystem for the next probably 12 to 24 months.
So, yeah, I don't think the value that layer 1 can capture has been exhausted. I think there's a lot more value to be had. I think the announcement that I'm waiting for is like for the first small nation to announce that they're issuing a central bank digital currency on Ethereum, maybe operating their own layer 2, plasma chain to manage transactions within their own country. Taxes maybe are automated. It provides the central bankers a lot more control over the providing data. They could do real-time monetary policy. This is like very unexplored. Like when we're even talking about blockchain value proposition, like this is sort of the ultimate bull case. It's like we haven't seen anything yet, right? When like political dissidents start using DAOs to like organize, that's when things start to get interesting. When I think about how that world translates into layer 1 versus layer 2 value capture, I'm sort of more bullish on layer 2s that own end user relationships. It's not so much like, okay, I have this layer 1 platform, what this gives me is this pooled security, as Tushar said. Okay, great, so what does this layer 2 platform give me? It's like, well, I'm not getting any security from it, so why would I pay you for that? I might be getting some censorship resistance out of it, but like I could probably have a network that does that itself. So it's like, at that point, what it becomes is the relationship with the user that is actually transacting, that is living or economically operating on that chain. And so I think if a government moves to the Ethereum blockchain and issues its own plasma chain, like they're going to get most of the value from their layer 2, right? It's not going to go to some other platform. When SpankChain operates our payment channels, we're the ones who own that end user relationship, and like that's where we are actually able to own the value from that layer 2 system. So that's my thoughts.
I think value capture means a lot of different things, and I think we're all answering the question in a little bit of a different way. But I think that this really clear distinction that people are trying to draw between layer 1 and layer 2, as though there are only 2 layers, is not really accurate. And there are already multiple layers on the blockchain. Like Solidity compiles down to EVM. That's a layer of abstraction there. With Plasma, at least, Plasma is a layer that just takes any arbitrary data, maybe like thousands of transactions processed off-chain, and sends a commitment to the Ethereum blockchain. So you can kind of think of, at least within the context of Plasma, scaling Ethereum as making a really big courthouse. And just in the same way that when you and I make a business agreement or a contract, we don't go to the courthouse every single time we create an agreement. We only go to the courthouse when we want to resolve a dispute. That's the same way that Plasma uses the Ethereum main chain. So the security of knowing that the law will be upheld, the guarantee of that in layer 2 Plasma is the same as in layer 1 Ethereum. What layer 2 is used for is the creation of all these contracts, and you only move off of layer 2 when something goes wrong and you have to take it back to the main chain. Yeah, so.
Can I ask you a question on that? Because I think that analogy is fantastic. Is there a scenario where you can imagine where layer 1 and layer 2 get upside down, where, to use your courthouse analogy, almost nothing is ever going to the courthouse because everything gets settled out of court all the time? And so how does that impact value capture in your opinion? Because if no one's going to the courthouse all the time, then maybe we don't want to pay so many taxes to maintain such a big courthouse.
The courthouse is there for the security guarantee. You don't have to use it. If you create state channels on top of the generalized Plasma predicate framework, you can settle the state channel disputes off-chain. But it's not so much about like whether people are going to Ethereum to resolve disputes or not. It's the fact that you can, and that you have that guarantee there. Did that answer?
I agree. And what I would say is it's less of a courthouse. It's more of like this really old bank with this huge safe that takes a long time to open the door. There's not much space in it, so you have to pay a lot for each piece of space you get. And so use it wisely. It's really secure. But guess what? You don't have to go there every day.
But what if people don't go there frequently, right? Does value still accrue there if people aren't going there all the time?
I think value accrues in both places. And I think there's definite value in just the security. I agree with you to that point. But I also believe that in a network environment where layer 2 is not just I'm stapling a server to my layer 1 blockchain. It's actually like a network that operates and runs, I think, and has a lot of similar features to what we like and see for value capture in layer 1s. And I think you're going to see tremendous value that's beyond, it's similar and beyond just transaction ARR calculations.
What are we looking at for the rest of the year then, if we take the assumption that the success of Ethereum does ride on the future of layer 2? For the rest of 2019, what are the biggest challenges / opportunities to get through?
So
These are
I'm
your
biased
closing
here.
remarks, by the way.
Scale, we're launching our mainnet this year. So we're going to have, it's working, right? The DevNet's been up for a long time, and that's what I'm excited about. So Q3, you'll see, Ethereum dApps moving, sub-second finality, 2,000 transactions per second, full state smart contracts execution. And I'm also excited about what's happening with Plasma and state channels. I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on.
So I'm very excited for the Scale launch as well, and several other launches coming this year. I think something that I'm keeping my eye on is the ratio of transactions that are happening at layer 2, whether it's a Scale chain or a Plasma chain or some other type of maybe Loom network, et cetera. How many transactions are happening at layer 2 versus layer 1 on Ethereum? And then also the total value of transactions that are happening at layer 2 versus layer 1 on Ethereum. And a thesis that I have is we should see more transactions, both in number and in value, on layer 2 than on layer 1 by the end of the year. And if we see that happen, I think that will increase my conviction in Ethereum actually winning. Whereas if we see that not happen, we see that people just stick to layer 1 on Ethereum and people are uncomfortable going over to layer 2, then I think that decreases the chances that Ethereum will be the ultimate winner.
And it increases the chances of Solana?
Or something else.
Right. So Yeah, what'll happen this year? A bunch of stuff will launch. So Connext has been working with Counterfactual. They have a payment channel hub. It's in production. You can use it today. If you want to have rapid payments, Ujo Music just integrated it for streaming payments. Plasma stuff I'll leave to Jain. Yeah, they're also working with Counterfactual, which is going to launch their client stuff. And I think mostly wallet integrations will happen. I know that there's teams working with MetaMask to allow for more easy access of end users to layer 2. That's like exactly the type of thing that you'll need to make it seamless to move your coins around and then be able to execute those transactions off-chain.
One of the main research hurdles that we surpassed this year with Plasma was the creation of generalized Plasma, where previously on layer 2 chains, you could mainly just do simple sends, so I send you money, but we couldn't have complex payment logic. And what generalized Plasma allows is for a type of contract called predicate contracts, which essentially allows for some limited subset of what you can do with an Ethereum smart contract. So you kind of have smart contracts on layer 2, which is pretty dope because you don't have to pay the same fees as you do on layer 1. But I don't think that's the main point here. You guys have all just heard a bunch of dope updates from all 4 of us. And there's this meme that Ethereum is failing and all these competitors are going to take over Ethereum because it doesn't scale. But it does fucking scale, and it scales today, and all of this shit is working in production. And all these other chains are really doing is that they're marketing harder and they're memeing harder. They raise their billions in ICO money and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna take over Ethereum with our 5 daily active users. No, that's such BS. And so if anyone as part of the community can really do anything to help Ethereum move along, it's meme harder, tweet about it, tell your friends. Ethereum does scale.
Thanks, you guys. That's a wrap from us. Thanks for joining us.